What's going on, everybody? I have Steve Wiseman here, covers Duke for the Herald, Sun, and the News and Observer. Steve, what's going on? Good talking to you again.
Yeah, Christopher, good to be with you. Yeah, it's a little better season for Duke thus far than what we've seen the last 2 years, but we'll see if they can get it back together here.
Yeah, and that's where I want to start. Last time we talked last year, and both teams have new coaches this year. So Duke, 4-3, 1-2 in the ACC. Miami 3-3, 1-1. Duke 3-9 last year, 2-9 the year before. I guess just for we'll get into the details, but just what in your mind is different with Duke this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the new staff has brought in kind of a modern approach to college football, and that's not really. It sounds like maybe a knock on the old staff, but it's not. It's just that they'd been here so long, they'd kind of fallen into habits, and this place just needed a breath of fresh air, basically. And Mike Elko had been at Texas A&M, he'd been at Notre Dame, like really high level, as good as it gets in college football, right? High level college football programs. And so he knew some modern techniques that were being done, different ways of training and different ways of teaching things that the players have really taken to. And they just, the attention to detail is so much better. You see it in the lack of turnovers compared to what Duke had the last 2 years. Penalties are still a little bit of a problem, but anyway, so it's just they're not hurting themselves as much. That's the biggest thing.
And the vibe, maybe Steve too, just sense on that, because look, all players want to get the most out. And I think we see it at Miami, just the players, they want to be the best, they want to have great success. And I think we've seen some changes at Miami just in terms of training, and the players seem to have taken to it, looking for better results on the field. But Steve, are you sensing some of that, just that the players are really enjoying that maybe this is different work or different outlook on how to approach the game?
Yeah, absolutely. And where it shows up is the resiliency the players show, even in games when they get behind. They were behind Georgia Tech 20-6 in the fourth quarter, came back and forced overtime, lost in overtime, but they got there, right? I mean, that's last week against Carolina, that was a back and forth game. Duke was down 10 points going into the fourth quarter, came back and took the lead, ended up losing it. But the point is, like two games like that last year or the year before would have ended like 42-6 or whatever. It wouldn't have been competitive. And that's the difference. These guys are really playing hard, playing, all the way 4 quarters, and they feel like they always have a chance to fight. And that's really a sign that they're how much more confident they are.
So this game will be played at Hard Rock down in Miami Gardens there, 12:30 RSN check local listings there. Miami's won the last 2 meetings in blowout fashion, the 48-0, 47-10. And just, new coaches on both sides. So it's different, but, players are there. Let's start with Riley Leonard. Just what are you seeing from him? He's impressive, 6 in the ACC in passing, but also, 6 in rushing, regardless of position. Obviously, if you haven't seen the highlights yet, I urge everybody to watch what he did rushing the ball against UNC. But what can you say about Riley, and what's he kind of bringing to the team at the quarterback spot?
So the main thing he's doing is he doesn't put the ball in danger. That goes back to the turnovers we talked about before. And Duke had 60 turnovers combined the last 2 seasons, which is just you can't win at any level doing that. And here Riley has just 3 interceptions so far. He's not. And even if you look at Pro Football Focus has a stat called turnover worthy plays, which goes beyond just the actual turnover or interceptions. And he only has 3 this year. One of his interceptions was bounced off somebody's arm, whatever. So he's making smarter decisions with the ball, and he's also you talk about his rushing ability. That's not like his strength, but he can do it when he needs to. That's what he's a drop back quarterback, but as we saw, the 74-yard run against Carolina on for the touchdown on Saturday night, once he gets in the open field, he can make some plays and get away. So he's become a threat. And even Mike Elko, we had a press conference earlier today, said if you look at where we saw Riley in spring compared to now, he's so much better than he was then. They weren't sure it was going to happen, but he's really put the work in, and he's really a smart kid and driven, and he's really getting the results.
Kevin Steele, Miami's defensive coordinator, talked a lot about Riley. He remembers, just when he was playing in high school in Alabama there, and he had a lot of positives to say about him too. And just Miami's going to be aware of this rushing thing, because Miami's given up some QB runs the last 2 weeks in the ACC play. So it'll be interesting to see if Riley can kind of break loose. Like you said, not his strength, but certainly can do it, and is productive there. You touch on, I want to get more into his decision making, not necessarily turnovers, but just the way he distributes the ball, the way he throws it. Miami's been susceptible against the pass, particularly deep balls this year. What do you notice kind of, decision makings in terms of how he goes through his reads? Not necessarily, I know you touched on the interceptions, but just his overall kind of passing progressions there.
Yeah, no, he's done a good job of that, and getting a lot of receivers involved in the game plan. And if you look at their receiving stats, there's nobody that's like far and away like the number one guy he targets all the time. Sometimes it's Jordan Moore, sometimes it's Jalen Calhoun. Eli Pancole's getting a lot of catches. The tight end's been involved a lot more. Nicky Dalmolian. So yeah, Riley again goes through his progressions very well, and he's not afraid to throw the ball away, when he needs to avoid a sack or not to force the ball. He hasn't. The interception he had at the end of the game Saturday when they were trying to come back after that touchdown by Carolina when they were behind was a tip ball where he had to force a play. He hasn't done very much of that. Now, a lot of it's because Duke they've been ahead in most of their games up until the last two. They haven't trailed very much, but he doesn't force plays. That's the biggest thing. And so that's been a real strength.
So you touched on Jalen Calhoun. Miami fans have seen him quite a bit over the years. A lot of the ACC teams have seen him. 170 catches in his career. He's getting close to 2,000 yards, which is really impressive. 5'11", 189 is what he's listed at. What are his strengths? And he did have a big game against Miami a couple years ago. He's been kind of bottled up. What stands out to me, his yards per catch is a career high right now. I know it's halfway through here, but what stands out to you? Maybe is there some things that are a little bit different with what Jalen's bringing?
Yeah, and mainly is the offense and what they're running. The previous staff didn't ask Jalen to go on deep balls very much. It was more he's a good athlete. They get the ball in space and let him make plays on little screen passes or bubble screens or whatever. But this offense is more vertical. They're doing more downfield stuff, so that's led to him making some big catches in that way. And he's a guy who in high school was an option quarterback, and so he's got ability to make plays in the open field and everything. And he's really taken to this system very well. And what he's done all that, he missed the game against Georgia Tech. He didn't play on offense. He got hurt returning a punt on the opening punt, first time Georgia Tech punted. So that's all those stats are missing one whole game of not catching anything. So he's really come a long way, and he's really been the leader of that group.
Running the ball. When I talked to, Kevin Steele talked about Duke, certainly he mentioned running the ball. He said they essentially run the ball against everybody, second in the ACC, over 200 yards a game. We touched so much on the passing game, but how does the run game either complement, or do you feel like they're trying to run to set up the pass? How would you kind of say this running game is right now?
I would say it's kind of run to set up the pass. And that's another thing that's helped the passing game is they haven't been in a lot of third and long situations. And that's because they're doing so well on first and second down. And I remember a couple of the touchdown drives against UNC in the first half Saturday. They didn't run a third down play on any of them. It was all first and second downs moving down the field. And a lot of it was running plays, getting them going, getting them so they don't get behind the chains. And so the offensive line has played very well. And they've played the last two games completely without their leading rusher at the time, Jalen Coleman, the junior running back, who's been out with they call it lower body injury, like an ankle type thing. So they put Jordan Waters in there. He's got some work done. Jordan Moore, Jaquez Moore. They've got a deep stable of running backs. And then, of course, what Riley Leonard adds, obviously, is a lot in the running game, too. They did lose one of their starting linemen, Maurice McIntyre, the starting left guard, dislocated his knee against Georgia Tech, and he had surgery. He's out for the season. So they're a little thinner now. They had to move Chance Lytle started at left guard the other night against Carolina. And so they're a little bit thinner there. They can't substitute as much. So those guys are going to play a little more. And they did fine against Carolina. They've really, as Steele said, they've run the ball against everybody, which is a big strength. But I want to see how that goes forward. If those guys playing more snaps, if they get worn out, start making mistakes, that kind of thing, that'll be something to watch for.
And Miami's run defense has been pretty good. Third in the ACC, averaging under 100 yards. They're coming off a game where they, under 80 yards there in the win over Virginia Tech. So they're doing well, particularly up front. That Miami's got some defensive linemen. They just rotate multiple guys in there, makes it tough. 3 yards a carry. I think it's going to be very interesting. We're talking about the quarterbacks. Miami's obviously getting loose, throwing the ball lately, but I think running the ball is going to be interesting to see if one of these teams can get some balance, because if they can get the run game going, and Miami's been struggling with that recently. So it'll be interesting to see how both of these run games kind of go. Duke's run defense, Steve, what do you make of it? Again, Miami wants to run the ball, even though they're throwing it. They want to get this running game going like they had early in the year. It's just not been working the way they'd like, but I think they still want to keep going to it. Josh Gaddis has talked about it. How would you kind of say that Duke's been able to kind of defend the run so far?
Yeah, it's not one of the better things. I mean, they were, frankly, the last couple of years, a very poor tackling team. And they're better this year, but they're still not great. So they've given up some plays where, guys have broken 2 or 3 tackles on the way to the end zone. And that's not something you want to see. Again, I know they're working on it. And again, they're a lot better than they were last year, but it's still not where they need it to be. And that causes them to give up some chunk plays, both in the passing game and the running game, because they're not wrapping up tackles like they should. But that's going to be it. It's funny you talk about this. It's going to be an old-fashioned kind of game in the trenches, isn't it? So who can establish the line of scrimmage in the run in this age of the spread offenses and everybody scoring 45, 50 points? Somebody's going to have to establish that line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball.
And I find it very interesting on the Miami standpoint, because again, Miami's been throwing the ball recently. It just got us the way he's talking about it. They just seem reluctant to really embrace this is what they are, or they have the quarterback that could do it and did it last year. I think they really just want to establish this identity to be a physical team up front. So I think they're going to keep trying. Miami's had some injuries at the running back spot, just not getting the production that they'd like. Also, the offensive line, Miami's had some injuries there, but I think people could easily look at the numbers and assume Miami doesn't want to run it, but I think they're going to try to establish it once again. That's why I think it's going to be interesting. But again, throwing the ball, Tyler Van Dyke, 351 last week, 496 the week before. He's really turning it on, getting some different receivers on. And looking at Duke's pass defense, it's not been good in terms of the numbers, second to last in the ACC. And when they played Power 5 teams, they're giving up over 300 yards in those games when they play Power 5 teams. Miami has to look at that and think maybe they've got some opportunities there, especially with the way they've been playing. Steve, what's kind of been the issue with that pass defense?
Yeah, it's really, he's trying to build a defensive secretary on the fly. And that unit has been really bad the last 2 years. If you look at Duke's stats, they gave up a lot of passing yards, they couldn't guard anybody, it seemed like. And so he brought in a couple of transfers, Darius Joyner, who's one of the leading tacklers at safety, Datron Young, a cornerback, came from Iowa State. He got hurt in the second half against UNC, didn't play. So that's hurt. So he's tried to bulk it up that way, but it's just not the talent level in the defensive back room just isn't where, Elko eventually sees Duke being, where he wants him to be. So he's kind of working with what he's got. And earlier in the year, they seemed to get a little grabby in pass coverage. So they got hit some PIs a lot. And that was kind of like left over from last year, I think Elko said, because they got a little panicky. They're not used to, making plays. They're used to getting beat, frankly. And so they're still kind of weeding some of that out. So watch out for that too. If I'm Miami or anybody, I put the ball in the air and hope, the good chance it might be a PI on some things. You move the ball that way.
It's interesting you say that. Mario Cristobal's been speaking a lot about the team. He feels like they're just anxious in the beginning of games. And certainly that's not something you like to see. But Miami's been struggling. They go up 10-0 in the first quarter last game. But before that, they had not scored a touchdown in a few games in the first quarter. So early starts still is something to watch for in this one. Steve, I'm fascinated to see where this one goes, because even though, both these teams essentially chasing North Carolina with the loss to them in the Coastal, it just feels like a pivotal game with where these teams are at. Maybe they can use this vault moving forward, and maybe get themselves a better bowl standing and whatnot and get in that mix. So, Steve, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we'll see how it goes.
Very good, Christopher. Good to be with you. Thanks a lot.